I believe in Jesus Christ. I mean, I believe that somebody existed called Jesus Christ who was probably, well, not even probably, certainly, the most remarkable man who ever lived.
What happens when a person dedicates part of his life to telling the story of Jesus Christ? Over the past several decades, 4 men have become closely connected to the life of Christ in the eyes of millions around the world. Mel Gibson, Jim Caviezel, Jonathan Roumie, and Robert Powell. Though they came from different generations and backgrounds, each of them experienced a unique journey that brought them closer to the message of Jesus. Their stories are not merely about filmmaking or acting. They are stories of faith, sacrifice, perseverance, and purpose. Each man was changed in some way by the role he played or the story he helped tell. This is the story of 4 remarkable journeys, different paths that all led to the same destination. A deeper connection to Jesus Christ and a mission to share his story with the world. Mel Gibson Long. Before he became known as the director of The Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson was already one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. His face was recognized around the world through blockbuster films, and his career seemed to have reached heights that many actors could only dream of. He had fame, influence, awards, and financial success. Yet behind the public image of the Hollywood superstar was a man whose life had been shaped by faith since childhood. Born in New York in 1956 and later raised in Australia, Gibson grew up in a large Catholic family. Religion was not simply a tradition in the household, it was a central part of daily life. From an early age, he became familiar with the stories of Scripture, the sacrifice of Christ, and the teachings of the Church. Although fame would eventually place him in one of the most secular industries in the world, those early influences never completely disappeared. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Gibson established himself as one of Hollywood's most successful actors. Films such as Mad Max, Lethal Weapon, and Braveheart turned him into a global icon. His success seemed unstoppable. In 1996, Braveheart earned him Academy Awards for Best Director and Best Picture, confirming his status as one of the most influential figures in the entertainment industry. Yet, despite all his accomplishments, Gibson found himself increasingly drawn to a story far older and more significant than anything Hollywood could create. For years, he had been deeply moved by the final hours of Jesus Christ. The suffering, sacrifice, and love displayed during the crucifixion fascinated him. While many filmmakers focused on the miracles, teachings, or resurrection of Jesus, Gibson became convinced that the Passion itself carried a message the modern world desperately needed to hear. The idea eventually grew into what many considered an impossible project. When Gibson began discussing a film about the final 12 hours of Jesus' life, the reaction from Hollywood was overwhelmingly negative. Studio executives questioned whether audiences would watch a movie centered almost entirely on suffering. Others worried about the film's religious themes. Some believed it would fail commercially. Many advised him to abandon the project altogether, but Gibson refused. Convinced that the story needed to be told exactly as he envisioned it, he made an extraordinary decision. Rather than compromise the film to satisfy investors or studio executives, he financed it himself. Reports would later estimate that he invested roughly $30 million of his own money into the production, with millions more spent on marketing and distribution. It was a gamble unlike anything he had attempted before. If the film failed, Gibson would not simply lose a project. He could lose a significant portion of his fortune, damage his reputation, and become known as the filmmaker who bet everything on a controversial religious movie. Yet those closest to him often described his determination as something deeper than professional ambition. He believed he was serving a purpose larger than himself. Production began in Italy, and almost immediately, unusual challenges emerged. The filmmakers sought historical authenticity, using Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew, rather than modern English. Many industry experts believed this decision alone would doom the project. Conventional wisdom suggested that audiences would never embrace a subtitled religious film. Again, Gibson refused to change course. He wanted viewers to experience the story as realistically as possible. He wanted them to feel transported back to first-century Judea. Above all, he wanted them to confront the reality of Christ's suffering in a way that few films had ever attempted. When The Passion of the Christ was finally released in 2004, controversy exploded. Critics debated its graphic portrayal of violence. Religious leaders argued over aspects of its presentation. News outlets covered the film relentlessly. Before many people had even seen it, strong opinions had already formed. Yet something remarkable happened. Audiences showed up in enormous numbers. Church groups filled theaters. Families traveled long distances to watch the film together. Many viewers reported being emotionally overwhelmed by what they saw. Some left theaters in tears. Others described the experience as deeply spiritual. What many experts had predicted would be a commercial disaster became a global phenomenon. The film ultimately earned more than $600 million worldwide, making it one of the most successful religious films ever produced. More importantly for Gibson, it sparked conversations about Jesus Christ in places where such discussions rarely occurred. Newspapers, television programs, churches, and families found themselves discussing the crucifixion and the meaning of Christ's sacrifice. For Gibson, the success of the film seemed to confirm what he had believed from the beginning. People were still searching for the story of Jesus. In the years that followed, he repeatedly spoke about the importance of faith and the impact the project had on his own life. While many directors measure success through awards or box office numbers, Gibson often described the Passion of the Christ in different terms. To him, it was more than a movie. It was a mission. The project required him to endure criticism, skepticism, and enormous financial risk. But it also strengthened his conviction that the message of Christ remained relevant in the modern world. Whether one agrees with all of his choices or not, few can deny the significance of what he accomplished. At a time when many believed a film about Jesus could never succeed on such a scale, Mel Gibson challenged the expectations of Hollywood and proved otherwise. Yet while Gibson carried the burden of directing the story, another man would bear its weight in a far more personal way. As cameras rolled and the world watched, actor Jim Caviezel would discover that portraying Jesus Christ came with a cost few could have imagined. Jim Caviezel. If Mel Gibson was the man who brought the story of Christ to the screen, Jim Caviezel was the man who would carry that story on his shoulders. Long before he became known around the world as Jesus in the Passion of the Christ, Caviezel was a respected actor building a promising career in Hollywood. Born in Washington State in 1968, he grew up in a devout Catholic family, where faith was more than a weekly tradition. It was woven into everyday life. His parents taught him the importance of prayer, sacrifice, and remaining faithful to one's convictions, even when doing so came at a personal cost. As a young man, Caviezel dreamed of becoming a professional basketball player. However, an injury forced him to abandon that path and pursue acting instead. What initially appeared to be a disappointment eventually opened a door he never could have imagined. Throughout the 1990s, he earned recognition through films such as The Thin Red Line, Frequency, and The Count of Monte Cristo. His career was steadily rising, and many believed he was on the verge of becoming one of Hollywood's leading actors. Then came the phone call that would change his life forever. When Mel Gibson approached Caviezel about portraying Jesus Christ, the actor was 33 years old, the traditional age associated with Jesus at the time of the crucifixion. Before production began, Gibson reportedly offered a warning that was both honest and unsettling. Playing Jesus could hurt your career. Hollywood was not known for rewarding openly religious actors. A film as controversial as The Passion of the Christ carried enormous risks. If audiences rejected the project, Caviezel's career could suffer. Even if the film succeeded, he might forever be identified with a single role. For many actors, such a warning would have been enough to walk away. Caviezel accepted the role anyway. Years later, he would explain that he believed God was calling him to do it. He understood the risks, but he felt that some opportunities were bigger than career calculations. This was one of them. As filming began in Italy, the physical demands quickly exceeded anything Caviezel had expected. The production sought authenticity at every level. Many scenes were filmed in harsh weather conditions. Temperatures frequently dropped to uncomfortable levels. Heavy costumes, difficult terrain, and long shooting days tested the endurance of everyone involved. But Caviezel seemed to face more than his share of hardships. During the filming of the Sermon on the Mount scene, he was reportedly struck by lightning. Remarkably, it was not the only unusual incident that occurred during production. Crew members later recalled several moments that seemed almost unbelievable. The crucifixion scenes proved especially brutal. The cross he carried was extremely heavy. During filming, he suffered a shoulder injury that reportedly led to a dislocation. He endured severe physical exhaustion while hanging on the cross during cold and windy conditions. At one point, he developed pneumonia and hypothermia. The combination of injuries and illness pushed his body to its limits. One of the most painful moments occurred during the scourging scene. Although safety measures were in place, a whip accidentally struck him. causing real injury and intense pain. The reaction visible on screen was not entirely acting. For many performers, such experiences would have been reasons to quit. Caviezel never did. Instead, he viewed the suffering through the lens of faith. He repeatedly emphasized that whatever pain he experienced was insignificant compared to what Jesus endured according to the gospel accounts. That perspective helped him continue through some of the most demanding scenes ever filmed for a religious movie. When The Passion of the Christ was released in 2004, Caviezel instantly became one of the most recognizable faces in the world. Millions watched his portrayal of Jesus. For countless viewers, his performance became inseparable from their memory of the film. The emotional intensity he brought to the role left a lasting impression on audiences across different cultures and denominations. Yet the success of the movie did not lead to the type of Hollywood career many expected. In interviews over the years, Caviezel has suggested that portraying Jesus came with professional consequences. While he continued working steadily, he never became the conventional blockbuster star that some industry observers had predicted before The Passion of the Christ. Whether by choice, circumstance, or industry perception, his career followed a different path. But if opportunities were lost, something else seemed to grow stronger: his faith. Rather than distancing himself from the role, Caviezel embraced it. He became increasingly vocal about his beliefs, speaking openly at conferences, religious gatherings, and public events. He frequently encouraged Christians to live courageously and remain faithful in a culture that often pressures people to remain silent about their convictions. For Caviezel, the role of Jesus was never simply another acting job. It became part of his personal testimony. He often speaks about sacrifice, purpose, and the importance of standing for truth regardless of the consequences. The same willingness that led him to accept the role despite Gibson's warning continued to define his public life long after filming ended. More than 2 decades later, audiences still remember him as the man who portrayed Christ in one of the most influential religious films ever made. Yet the most remarkable part of his story may not be the performance itself. It may be the fact that he accepted the role knowing it could cost him everything. In an industry where success is often measured by fame and opportunity, Jim Caviezel chose a different standard. He chose to follow his convictions, regardless of where they led. And in doing so, he became more than an actor portraying Jesus. He became a man whose own journey of faith was forever shaped by the cross he carried on screen. But while Jim Caviezel introduced one generation to the suffering and sacrifice of Christ, another actor would later bring audiences a very different image of Jesus, one marked by compassion, friendship, and everyday humanity. His name was Jonathan Roumie, and his journey to faith would prove just as extraordinary. Jonathan Roumie. By the time Jonathan Roumie became known around the world as Jesus in The Chosen, he had already spent years struggling to keep his dream alive. Unlike Mel Gibson, who entered the story as a successful filmmaker, or Jim Caviezel, who was already gaining recognition in Hollywood, Roumie's path was marked by uncertainty, disappointment, and moments when his acting career seemed on the verge of ending altogether. Born in New York City, Jonathan Roumie grew up in a family that valued faith. His father had Egyptian roots and belonged to the Coptic Christian tradition, while his mother was Irish and Catholic. These influences exposed him to Christianity from an early age. But like many believers, his faith would later be tested by the realities of adult life. After studying film and pursuing acting professionally, Roumie spent years searching for opportunities. He appeared in small projects, voiceover work, and minor television roles, but the breakthrough he hoped for never seemed to arrive. While some actors quickly find success, Roumie's journey became a long lesson in patience. As the years passed, financial pressure increased. There were moments when he questioned whether he should continue pursuing acting at all. Bills accumulated, opportunities remained limited. The future seemed increasingly uncertain. According to Roumie, one of the lowest points came when he found himself with very little money and almost no professional prospects. Like many people facing impossible situations, he turned to prayer. Rather than asking God for a specific role or a particular outcome, he prayed for guidance and surrender. He spoke openly about reaching a point where he placed his career entirely in God's hands, accepting that whatever happened next would be according to God's will. What happened next surprised him. Shortly afterward, opportunities began appearing in unexpected ways. One of those opportunities would eventually lead to a project that almost nobody expected to succeed. That project was The Chosen. At the time, it was far from a major television production. It had no massive studio behind it. No one was predicting that it would become a worldwide phenomenon. In fact, many observers viewed it as another small faith-based project with limited reach. But something about the series was different. Instead of focusing only on major biblical events, the creators sought to present Jesus and his followers as real people, living real lives. The storytelling emphasized relationships, emotions, struggles, and personal transformation. When Roumie stepped into the role of Jesus, audiences immediately noticed something unique. His portrayal differed from many previous depictions of Christ. He could be serious without appearing distant. He could be authoritative without appearing harsh. He could laugh, smile, and show warmth while still maintaining a sense of reverence. For many viewers, this version of Jesus felt surprisingly personal. Rather than seeing a distant historical figure, audiences felt as though they were watching someone who genuinely cared about the people around him. Millions connected with that portrayal, and the popularity of The Chosen grew far beyond anyone's expectations. As the series expanded globally, Roumie's life changed dramatically. The actor who once struggled to pay bills suddenly found himself recognized by viewers from every continent. Churches invited him to speak. Christian conferences requested appearances. Interviews multiplied. Social media audiences grew into the millions. Yet perhaps the most remarkable transformation was not professional, but spiritual. Unlike some actors who leave a role behind when filming ends, Roumie often speaks about how portraying Jesus deepened his own faith. He has described spending significant time in prayer before filming important scenes. He studies scripture regularly and seeks to understand the emotional and spiritual dimensions of the gospel stories he portrays. The role became more than a performance. It became part of his personal walk with Christ. Several cast members and crew members have also spoken about the unique atmosphere surrounding the production. Prayer frequently became part of the filming process. Moments of worship occurred both on and off camera. Actors often discussed how the series affected their own spiritual lives. For many involved, the experience felt different from a typical television production. Roumie himself has repeatedly emphasized that he does not see himself as Jesus. Instead, he views his work as an opportunity to point people toward Christ. That distinction is important to him. Whenever audiences praise his portrayal, he often redirects attention toward the gospel message rather than himself. He understands that millions associate his face with Jesus, but he consistently reminds people that his role is temporary, while Christ's message is eternal. The impact of The Chosen has been extraordinary. The series has reached hundreds of millions of viewers worldwide and has been translated into numerous languages. Many viewers have shared stories of returning to church, reading the Bible again, or rediscovering their faith after watching the show. For some, the series became their first meaningful introduction to Jesus. For others, it helped them see familiar gospel stories through fresh eyes. In many ways, Jonathan Roumie became the face of Jesus for a new generation, just as Robert Powell had been for an earlier one, and Jim Caviezel for another. Yet unlike those who came before him, Roumie entered the role during the age of social media, streaming platforms, and global digital communication. His portrayal reached audiences not only through television screens, but through phones, tablets, and online communities around the world. Looking back, the journey seems almost impossible to predict. A struggling actor with little money, uncertain prospects, and a fading career placed his future in God's hands. Years later, he became one of the most recognizable Christian actors in the world. His story serves as a reminder that some of life's most significant turning points arrive when hope appears to be running out. For Jonathan Roumie, following Jesus did not begin with worldwide success. It began with surrender. And perhaps that is why so many people connect with his story. It reflects a truth found throughout Scripture itself. Before God uses someone in a remarkable way, he often leads them through seasons of waiting, uncertainty, and trust. But long before Jonathan Roumie brought Jesus to modern audiences, another actor had already created one of the most iconic portrayals of Christ ever seen on screen. Decades before The Chosen, one face became so closely associated with Jesus that millions could never forget it. That face belonged to Robert Powell. Robert Powell. Long before The Passion of the Christ and decades before The Chosen, there was another portrayal of Jesus that left an unforgettable mark on the world. For millions of Christians, when they imagined the face of Christ, they saw Robert Powell. His piercing blue eyes, calm presence, and gentle yet commanding voice became inseparable from the image of Jesus for an entire generation. Even today, nearly 50 years after its release, many people still consider his performance in Jesus of Nazareth to be one of the most powerful portrayals of Christ ever captured on screen. Yet Robert Powell never expected that one role would define so much of his life. Born in England in 1944, Powell developed an interest in acting at an early age. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, he had established himself as a talented actor in British television and film. He possessed a distinctive screen presence and a reputation for taking complex, dramatic roles. However, despite his growing success, he was not yet a household name outside the United Kingdom. Everything changed when acclaimed director Franco Zeffirelli began searching for the actor who would portray Jesus in what would become Jesus of Nazareth. The project was ambitious from the beginning. Zeffirelli wanted to create the most comprehensive and authentic dramatization of the life of Christ ever produced for television. The production would feature an extraordinary cast, massive sets, and filming locations designed to recreate the world of first-century Judea. But finding the right actor for Jesus proved to be the greatest challenge. The role demanded someone who could communicate authority without arrogance, compassion without weakness, and divinity without losing touch with humanity. Countless actors were considered, but Zeffirelli ultimately chose Robert Powell. It would become the defining decision of Powell's career. To prepare for the role, Powell immersed himself in the gospel accounts and the historical context of Jesus' life. He understood that millions of viewers already held deeply personal images of Christ in their minds. No portrayal could satisfy everyone. Nevertheless, he approached the role with seriousness, humility, and respect. One of the most distinctive features of his performance became his eyes. Throughout much of the series, Powell rarely blinked during key scenes. Whether intentional or the result of Zeffirelli's direction and cinematography, the effect was striking. His gaze seemed almost otherworldly, giving audiences the sense that Jesus was looking directly into their souls. Viewers never forgot it. When Jesus of Nazareth premiered in 1977, the response was extraordinary. The miniseries quickly became a global event. Broadcast in numerous countries, it reached audiences of different cultures, languages, and denominations. Families gathered around television sets to watch the story unfold. Churches recommended it. Religious leaders praised its respectful treatment of the gospel narrative. Unlike many biblical productions that faded with time, Jesus of Nazareth endured. Year after year, particularly during Easter season, the series continued to be rebroadcast around the world. New generations discovered it, while older viewers returned to it again and again. As a result, Robert Powell's image became permanently connected to Jesus in the minds of millions. But that connection came with challenges. Many actors dream of landing a role that changes their lives. Few stop to consider what happens when that role becomes impossible to escape. For Powell, portraying Jesus was both a blessing and a burden. The performance earned widespread admiration and secured his place in television history. At the same time, it became difficult for many viewers to see him as anyone else. No matter what role he accepted afterward, audiences often continued to identify him primarily as Jesus. It is a challenge that many actors associated with iconic characters have faced throughout history. Yet in Powell's case, the connection was particularly powerful because the character was not fictional. He had portrayed the central figure of Christianity itself. Despite this, Powell continued building a successful career in television, film, and narration. Over the years, he participated in numerous productions and became a respected voice actor and presenter. Yet no achievement would ever surpass the influence of Jesus of Nazareth. Interestingly, unlike Jim Caviezel or Jonathan Roumie, Powell did not become widely known as a public spokesperson for Christianity. He generally maintained a more private approach regarding personal faith and religious discussions. Nevertheless, he consistently spoke about the role with deep respect. He understood the significance of what he had been asked to portray and recognized the impact the series had on audiences around the world. Even decades later, people would approach him to share stories about how the mini-series strengthened their faith or helped them better understand the life of Christ. Those encounters revealed something remarkable. A performance created for television had become part of people's spiritual journeys. For many viewers, Robert Powell's portrayal served as their first visual encounter with Jesus. It shaped how they imagined gospel events. It influenced how they understood Christ's compassion, wisdom, and sacrifice. In some cases, it even inspired deeper interest in Scripture itself. Few actors can say that a single role affected millions of lives. Even fewer can say that role continued touching people nearly half a century later. Looking back, Robert Powell's journey stands apart from the others in this story. Mel Gibson was the filmmaker who risked everything to tell Christ's story. Jim Caviezel carried the suffering of Christ to the big screen with extraordinary intensity. Jonathan Roumie introduced Jesus to a new generation through long-form storytelling and modern media. But Robert Powell became something unique. He became the image of Jesus for an entire era. His portrayal crossed national borders, denominational differences, and cultural barriers. It reached believers and non-believers alike. Decades later, it remains one of the most influential depictions of Christ ever produced. And while countless actors have portrayed Jesus throughout history, only a handful have left a legacy so enduring that generations continue to remember their face whenever the story of Christ is told. With Robert Powell's story complete, one question remains. What connects these four men so powerfully across different decades, different backgrounds, and different experiences? The answer is not fame, success, or even acting. The answer is Jesus Christ himself.